The Lord Jesus said in the Gospel of Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, a scripture that you know very well, and I'd like to read it to you. In verse 38, the Lord Jesus said, "Now give, and it shall be given unto you, a good measure. It shall be pressed down, it shall be shaken together, and running over shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that you give, it shall be measured to you again." As I grew up as a young man, I never remember that being preached on in my life. I heard preached all of my life as I grew up in a Pentecostal church that God's people ought to be poor. It never did register with me for the simple reason my father worked in a machine shop. When I was born, he was making ships in New Orleans to go to the war in Europe. And then when the war was over, he worked in machine shops where they built trains. So I only knew him in machine shops. He always made a good living. We always had a beautiful car. And so I didn't react, to what I was hearing in church very well because I didn't find it at home. But all my life, I heard that when you preached, you should be poor, and that all of God's people should be like Jesus, very, very poor. And that if you had anything, then you were not like Jesus, And I'm just wondering where he's going to put some of you in heaven, seeing that you'll want to continue your poverty up there. Maybe he does have a poor section for some of these poor people, He wants them to be comfortable, so he'll put them over in the shanty town, if heaven has a shanty town. But if God is our Heavenly Father, we ought to try to be like him. And if Abraham is our natural father on this earth, then we should try to be like him. Can you say amen? Now, I learned very quickly that people should give to me. I went out preaching when I was 17 years of age, and when I left home, I had 65 cents. I didn't think about it. If I'd have thought about it, I might have asked my mother for some money. But I didn't think about it, so I didn't ask her for any money. I was so desirous to go out and preach that I never thought about the money I had until a little later. Later you think about those things. And I went and preached in this country schoolhouse for a week. And finally I said, now let me see here. Something's wrong. We're not getting any money. Nobody's giving us anything. Maybe you have to take up offerings. Yeah, I was a 17-year-old, you see. And I said, now at home every Sunday they take up offerings in the church. Maybe I better take up an offering. I've been here a week. So I told them we'd take up a collection. There's a difference between an offering and a collection. I had to learn that too. I didn't know that either. And in those days, you didn't have containers to take up an offering in. How many ever heard the little phrase, pass the hat? We used to do that. We'd say, any of you farmers got a hat? And somebody would loan you his old hat that was 20 years old, looked like a horse had bit off the side of it, and you weren't sure that it would hold the money or not. But anyway, you'd pass that thing around, and as soon as I passed it around, he said, "Give me my hat." That meant you couldn't keep the offering in it during the rest of the service. So being 17 years old, I dumped it on the altar rail. I handed him his hat, and then I counted the offering. 1, 2, 3, 4. I was counting pennies. There wasn't a single nickel in the whole thing. Wasn't a single dime in the whole thing. It was all pennies. 26 pennies. And a 17-year-old boy will talk when he ought to be thinking, And I said, I don't believe I can live on 26 pennies. Of course, this was during the Depression. Roosevelt was in the White House, and he fixed things up for us pretty well. And so a penny was a penny, You could buy a sucker ball with a penny those days. And so I got angry inside. I said, "You don't have any money? That's what's wrong with you people?" I said, "Anybody got chickens?" And they raised their hand. I said, "Tomorrow night there'll be a chicken coop outside there, and I don't mean maybe. Every one of you bring me a chicken tomorrow night." Now, I'd never heard of anybody doing that or anything like that, but I didn't get any money, you see. Then I said, anybody got any pigs? And they all raised their hand. I said, on this side, there'll be some coops for pigs. And I don't mean maybe. You bring pigs tomorrow night. Well, the next night, we couldn't have church. We had so many chickens out there cackling. And we had so many pigs grunting, we had a barnyard outside, you know. And everybody got so happy, they had a barnyard there. I turned it all over to one of the farmers, and he went to the wholesale market and sold it the next day. And I was the richest preacher in 50 miles. The rest of them didn't have enough sense to ask for what the people had. And don't ask for what they don't have. They didn't have any money. And so I got along well. I got along so well that in a few months' time, I bought a new Ford car. So I can't tell you any sad stories about the ministry. I'm too smart for that. I was born that way, you see. And when I didn't get a fair deal, then I worked out a deal of my own. And I found it worked. How many like to know how much a new Ford car cost in 1930 and 31? It cost $485 for a brand new one. And so we had a car, and I took my sister, took her around with me. And then in 1934, I was 20 years old. And so it was time for me to be a missionary. So in San Francisco, I got on a boat to be a missionary and had $12 in the whole world. I had asked nobody to help me. I hadn't asked nobody to do anything. I'd asked no denomination to support me. You know, I just said, Jesus said go, and Jesus is in charge, and I'll go. So I got on the boat with just $12. And it was a little, disconcerting, because I had preached for 3 nights previous to getting on the boat in one of the largest churches in America, Glad Tidings Tabernacle, San Francisco, California. Dr. Robert Craig, pastor, big, tall, elegant, handsome gentleman, owned a big Bible school there that 4 or 5 stories high right downtown, owned this big auditorium where Smith Wigglesworth had been, Dr. Charles Price had been, Amos Semple McPherson had been, Howard Carter had been. All these men had preached there, seated about 3,000, which was like 50,000 today. And so I preached there for 3 nights, and he gave me no offering. Now, when you get to be a preacher, you learn how people take up offerings. You listen. And when they don't mention your name, that means you don't get any of it. How many could have figured that out? And so, but he did take me to the boat. On the way to the boat the next day, he said, young man, he was past 60 and I was 20. He says, young man, who is sending you around the world? And I said, Jesus. And I saw his face flush. He got angry. He said, that's what all you kids say, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I said, yes, sir. I didn't know if anybody said it but me, but I said, yes, sir. He said, did you ask the brethren? He meant in Springfield, Missouri at the Assemblies of God headquarters. I said, no, my big brother told me to go, and these little brothers didn't have anything to do with it. Now, he was an executive in the organization, and he got angry. He said, that's what's wrong with you, young men. You're off doing things without any advice from your elders. Well, I said, Jesus is my elder, and he told me to go, and I'm obeying Jesus. He looked at me with his face still flushed and said, I can see. You're going to go to China and starve to death. Well, I'm Irish, besides being a Christian, which is a poor combination usually. But I laughed, An Irishman will laugh when he's dying if you don't watch him. I laughed at him and I said, well, if I go to China and starve to death, would you send out a little stone about this big saying, here lies Lester Sumrall. He starved to death trusting Jesus. He said, no, I won't send it. And I said, for your information, I won't need it. Goodbye. And that was a sorry farewell, Real sorry farewell. I felt bad about it. But I got on the boat and I began to think of what he had said, that starved to death business. And I counted my resources. 12 $1 bills. Wouldn't keep you in a hotel 2 nights, even in the Depression. And the devil began to say, what you going to do? And I said, I'm going to find out something. If God's real, I'm going to give him all. And if he's not real, I'm going to give him nothing. I'm going to go to the devil full steam if he's not real. Well, God takes up a challenge like that, So I arrived in Australia, and the first church I preached in was the largest Pentecostal church in the country, in Melbourne. Mr. Greenwood was the pastor of the church. in those days, I guess he seated around 1,000, and man, that was like 10,000 a day or more. And so I preached for a whole week for him. And I kept listening. You know, I listened to offerings. And I kept listening, and he never did mention my name. So after the week was over, and I went back to my room, I stayed with the saints in those days. If you leave off the S, you know what you got left. And so I stayed with the saints. And I went and closed the room where I was staying, and I began to cry. I had an engagement the next night in another city, and I didn't have a dime. I'd spent my money. I had to have some little necessities, you know. And so it was all gone. And then something rose up inside of me, and I said, God, I'd like to talk to you. For your information, I am not leaving this room. Hear me. I will not go on the street saying, ticket, ticket, anybody got a ticket? I said, you're going to bring the ticket here or I'll die in this room. Now I said, I'll stay here until the ticket comes. I said, I'm not going down to the train station and walk in around and say, anybody got a ticket? Anybody got a ticket? I said, I'm going to stay here. It's your responsibility. Breakfast time came, and the lady of the house said, Brother Sumrall, breakfast? I said, I don't want any. Because I'd cried all night. I didn't need any breakfast. But I did something. I want you to catch that. I packed my suitcase. I packed my briefcase. I put my suitcase by the door with my briefcase by it, with my top coat on top of it, and my hat on top of the top coat. And I said, God, for your information, I'm ready. You can bring the ticket now. I know what some of you would have done. If somebody had brought a ticket, you'd have still missed the train. You wouldn't be packed yet. And God would not have brought you a ticket. He doesn't bring a ticket for people that don't have enough sense to pack. Are you here? All right. Now, I didn't realize this. I've had to think this over since that time. That I had something inside of me. Like when I demanded the Arkansas people and the Tennessee people and the Alabama people to give me produce during the Depression, that they had that. They didn't know what to do with it. But I knew what to do with it. A preacher can live on it, you see, if he can sell it. And go to the wholesale house and you can sell it very easy. And so now here I was, and I didn't know what to do. I'd preached my heart out for a week, and the man had given me nothing. I stayed in that room with the door locked. Another hour, an hour and a half. Knock on the door, and the lady of the house says, a man to see you. Would you see him? I said, I guess so. And here came in a tall Australian, large man. He was crying. I had one look at him. I said, my God, I got enough trouble without you. What do you want? He said, I couldn't sleep last night. Well, I said, I didn't either. Now what do you want? I didn't know what he wanted. I had no idea what he wanted at all. Well, he says, now, in our church, we all know that you're rich. Now, I relaxed it. You know, you tell me I'm rich, and I always relax. It's just a good feeling, you know. It don't last long, but it's a good feeling, you know. For someone to say, hey, you're rich, you know, immediately you say, ooh, that feels good, you know. And I looked at him and I smiled. I never tell you you're a liar, because it might be you're prophesying. Yeah, I'm still waiting on that. Yeah, and he said, now we all know you're rich. Now, I was by myself. I had no other person in the world. I had not said anything to anybody. And how they found out I was rich, I don't know, because I had no money at all. Not at all. I just said, yes, sir. But he said, God spoke to me last night and said, you didn't understand our train system here. You have to have a reservation plus a ticket. That this train you're going on is a reserved train. So you have a seat reservation, then you have a ticket to be on the train. You need 2 tickets. I said, I didn't know that. Hadn't bought any tickets yet in this country. And he said, well, what I told you is this. If I came and you had tickets, I'd never trust God as long as I lived. I said, I don't have any tickets. No, sir. No tickets. He pulled them out. He said, God made me go buy these in order to have faith in him. And I have your tickets right here, both of them. I put those tickets in my pocket. I said, let's go. He grabbed my suitcase. I grabbed my briefcase and my top coat and my hat. 2 of the happiest men in the world. He had found that God was right, and I had found God as a supplier, you see? And we were really flowing together. I hated to get on the train. He became such a good friend as we just went to the train station. And I got by a window, and I just kept waving as long as I could see him. And he was waving too. You say, why? God had done two things. He had made him to be a supplier. He had made me to be a receiver. You see, that's how good God is. But the problem was I only learned to be a receiver. All around the world, I'd learned to be a receiver. I never thought I'd give. I thought preachers weren't supposed to give. I didn't know. I'd never seen a preacher in my church, and I was about putting a thing in the offering. He just looked at it. But you come to my church and see how I operate. I put something in every offering. My people know that. You see, yeah, I don't do it for them to see it. I do it because I love to do it, because I'm planting all the time, and I need to plant more, you see. So I'm willing to do it. In Australia, I joined up with Mr. Howard Carter from London, England. He was twice my age. By the time we got together, I was 21, he was 42. And he said, now, young man, isn't it nice to be a young man? I'm going to always be that way. He said, young man, I never discuss finance with anybody. Now, I wanted so bad to tell him, you've never been married, have you? But, you know, he was twice my age. I couldn't be a smart aleck. I just said, yes, sir. He said, you and I will travel together, but we will never discuss money. I'm a man of faith. Says when we go down to get our ticket, you'll get yours, I'll get mine. If you don't have money, you just stay. If I don't have any money, I'll stay and you go. But says we'll both live by faith. I said, yes, sir. All right. We got to Hong Kong, and they were having war all over China. The Russians were coming in through Mao Zedong up in the north, the Russian gear, and the Japanese were coming in from the north. They were coming in from the west. Chiang Kai-shek was running as fast as he could to get over to Taipei and escape war. And they had three armies moving. And we got involved in all three of the armies in a year's time and didn't die. But in Hong Kong, there were missionaries from all over China. They'd been chased out by the armies. And so we had a convention. And all the missionaries decided that up in Tibet, they weren't part of the war, that there was peace up there. And the French had a little railroad running up that way to where you could find a mule train, and a mule would take you in. Said, you and Brother Carter, you know, there's war all over China. Go to Tibet. Brother Carter said, yeah, I want to go. I said, yeah, I want to go. But there was one problem. I had 10 cents in the whole world. We had a covenant, we couldn't talk about it, so I couldn't say, I got a dime. I don't know what he had. But when they would talk about going, they'd say to me, says, you're going to go, aren't you? I'd say, yes. Now you got to listen carefully, you'll miss it. If I'd have said no, I only have 10 cents, I never would have gotten to Tibet. I never would have gotten there. Because we had an agreement. If he had money, he'd go by himself. And if I didn't have any money, I'd stay right there till he got back. You see, that was an agreement we had. And we'd been together for about a year. And so I knew that he'd live up to his agreement. I'd found that out. But until this moment, I'd had money, but this time I had 10 cents. Now, in our meetings, they were unusual. He was a teacher. He'd lay hands on you to receive the gifts of the Spirit. He'd lay hands on the pastors to receive an anointing, to lay hands on people to receive gifts of the Spirit. And so he was so busy with that. God had sent him for that I'd have another area where the people got saved, where the people received their healing. So I was praying for sinners and praying for people to get healed, usually in another auditorium. And so we worked together, but yet we were two different ministries functioning. So in Hong Kong, I'd never been in the Orient before. I looked, and everybody looked exactly alike. What was it? I said, how are you ever going to learn how to know who's who in this place? Everybody got black hair, everybody got black eyes, everybody wears the same color clothes. How am I ever going to know who these people are? And I'd call the healing line, I'd be there a couple of hours. I said, you people going in a circle, I can't quite identify you, but I'm just sure I'm praying for the same people over and over again here. And one woman, I stopped her and I said, no, I'm sure I prayed for you before. Were you in this line last night? She said, yes, I was. Well, I said, did you get healed? Yes. I said, well, what you here tonight for? Well, he says, you're going to Tibet. And says, while you're gone, I might get sick. And then I'm getting this prayer and I'm going to save it. And when I get sick, I'm going to use it. Well, I said, I heard you Chinese are smarter than us. Now I know you are. You've proven that you are. Every night after church, the missionary lived kind of close by upstairs. You have to know Hong Kong to know what it means. But up on the first floor, then they have a big balcony. And so he had an apartment there and a balcony. And we'd all sit out on that balcony at night and have a cup of tea and talk about the whole of China. the big tails of those guys could tell what they were doing on. They'd all been chased out by the war. And then they'd said, but Tibet, it's virgin. Nobody's ever been to Tibet yet. Why don't you go up to Tibet and preach to those people? Says they're not in war either. They're sovereign state, and says go up there. And so Brother Carter said, oh, I just want to go so bad. And I said, yeah, I want to go bad too. But the devil kept saying, you know what you got in your pocket? You've only got a dime. I said, yeah, but I'm going to Tibet. I'm going to Tibet. Then one little Chinese lady came up one night with a servant, and she had 3 crates of fruit. Canned fruit from California. I mean, it was expensive. All the way into China with those delicious peaches from California and pears from California. And she had 3 crates of them. They had, about 20 cans in a crate. And she says, you're going to Tibet? Says, my husband is a general up there in the army, and if you don't take your own food, you'll die. It says, this will keep you alive. If you'll eat 1 can a day till you get back, you'll come back alive. It says, this will surely keep you alive. So she placed it on the platform, the servant did, and the devil laughed clear out loud. He said, you're going to eat that fruit in Hong Kong? I know you are. And you're not going to Tibet. You only have a dime. You can't even write a letter. You can't buy a postage stamp. Says you can't even ride the streetcar. You have to walk because you only have a dime. I said, yeah, but I'm going to Tibet. And he said, the fruit's going to be eaten in Hong Kong. I said, it's going to be eaten in Tibet. Now, if you can't say that, it won't work. You can't say that. So night after night, I kept praying for all these people. We were going to get our love offering at the end of the meeting, and Brother Carter and I would divide it, but it would never take you to Tibet. The same little woman came back 2 or 3 days later and says, I have to leave town tomorrow. And says, the Lord spoke to me and said, to give you this envelope. I said, thank you very much. And I put it in my pocket. And after we got through the service, we were upstairs with all these missionaries having a little tea and a cookie or something. And I went to my room and I undressed, and the Lord said to me, he says, in your pocket there is a little envelope. I said, yeah. I said, that's right, but that's 200 or 300 Hong Kong dollars are not going to help me very much. I said, I don't want to look at it. I was expecting American money from America. Every day I said, in the mail. That's a bad thing too, because God has His own places to do it. You think you know, but God really knows. You see. And so I turned over to go to sleep. I turned out the light. The Lord says, "You got an envelope in your pocket?" I said, "Yeah, I do. Tomorrow morning I'll look at it." He said, "You got an envelope in your pocket." I said, "I can't go to sleep unless you stop talking." So I got up and went to the old shift robe type of thing there. In my coat, I got out the envelope. And I tore the top of it up and reached down to pull what was in there out. And it was what Bob had a while ago, a $100 bill. You want to know something? I'd seen a $100 bill a time or two at a bank, but I had never owned one. During the Depression, you worked mostly with change. We had little purses about this big, and we all worked with change. Man, you could go to a grocery store and buy all kind of groceries for less than $1, 5 cents of this and 10 cents of that. And a dollar bill was a prize. But you didn't get very many of them in church, I can tell you that. And a $5 bill, man, you were in business with a $5 bill. And a $10 bill was something you didn't show everybody, you just showed very special people. But a $100 bill, I had never owned one. And I had never owned one in my life. And here was a $100 bill. I looked at it. I smelt of it. How many have ever smelt of money? Yeah, if you've used it a few times, it stinks. But you get it right from the bank with the ink still fresh, and it smells good. How many ever smelled good money? Clean money, not filthy money. Clean money. I reached in to pull the rest of the contents out. It was all $100 bills. And I flipped them. How many's ever flipped bills? Isn't that a lot of fun? Then I counted them. There were 31 $100 bills. Yeah. Man, I sold my new car for a couple of $100 in $5 and $10 bills, And here was more money than I ever had in my whole life, you see. 3,000. the first thing I thought of was Brother Carter. Oh my God, I wish I could tell him. We have a covenant not to talk about money. I'd just love to give him half of it, but I can't do it. He don't permit that. I felt so bad that I couldn't just say, hey, you know, but I couldn't. I went to bed that night, and the next morning, I couldn't tell people what had happened, but if they'd have just watched me at the breakfast, they'd have seen something. I said, I'm going to get my ticket today. I'm going to get the boat ticket across the Gulf of Tonkin over into Hanoi and Haiphong. And I'm also going to get the ticket on the train for 3 days and nights up into Yunnan province, and I am ready. Those missionaries looked at one another. This was a 21-year-old kid talking. He hadn't gotten his offering yet. And he was going to go and buy these expensive tickets clear into Tibet, you know. They could just look at you through the side of your eye and say, whatever happened during the night? He sure didn't have anything last night, you know. You say, how did you come to that money? She told me, the little lady, she says, I'm the wife of a general, and we're very rich. Says, God spoke to me. Said, I had to do this. Says, you prayed for me the first night. I had just come from the hospital. I looked up and saw a sign that said healing. And I walked in, didn't know what in the world it was, only I had cancer all through my stomach. And I came here to have British doctors operate on me and to save my life. And the first day they x-rayed, and there was all the massive cancer inside of me. And so they said that they'd have to build up my strength before I could be operated on. So that night I came and saw this sign, and you prayed for me. I went back to the hospital the next day for the next x-ray, and they said it was gone. They had 2 x-rays. One was there, one was there. They said, what happened to you? She says, an American prayed for me down on the street down there in the hall. And he commanded the cancer to go. They shook their heads. They didn't know what to think about it. Especially British doctors are very careful. And she came back that night for more prayer. You know, the Chinese don't ever stop getting prayed for. And for more prayer. And then she went back the next day for another x-ray. They said, well, it's just like it was the day before. It's all gone. Well, she said, thank you very much. She came back the next night for prayer. And she didn't tell me what had happened, but she did bring the fruit, like I told you. And then she went back the next day to the hospital. I said, well, how long are you going to come? He says, you got 4 x-rays now. 3 show you don't have it, 1 shows you do. He says, we'll give you all the x-rays. You can take them to your husband. And if you'll have a doctor there, he'll show you that you do not have cancer. So she said, God told me that I had to give you the money I would have paid the doctors and the money I would have paid the hospital, that I had to give it to you. And that was what was in that envelope, you see. And so because of the ministry that flowed out, we received back. You say, did that pay your way to Tibet and back? Well, when we got up there, we found that $1 American was 2,500 of their dollars. So when we went to get one of those $100 bills changed, my dear brother, we took a suitcase this big, you know, and had to stomp it in there. Talking about running over, we had it pushed down and running over. And when we got on the mule back, we hired 17 mules to take us. We had an interpreter with us, and we had mules that had food on them and mules that had money on them. We had 2 boxes of money, wooden boxes on one on each side of a mule. One mule was a money mule. He carried all the money. You couldn't carry it in your pocket, you know, and you'd have been swamped. But we didn't have just enough money to go to Tibet. We lived in China for a year. We had enough money for the whole year through China. And I often wanted to tell my companion, Brother Carter, oh, I'd like to tell you something, but you won't let me. You know, don't make covenants, you may have to live up to them. But we found that receiving was mighty nice. We went on receiving in Japan and Korea, Manchuria, went across Siberia and Russia into Poland and received again. Then we got to England and we got stuck. It's always a place to get stuck. In those days, about 10 shillings was a good offering. Not an offering. They didn't give you offerings. They gave you what they call honorariums. Not very honorable, but they were honorariums. And then sometimes they give you a pound note, at 20 shillings. And then once in a while, if it was a convention, you get 30 shillings, and that was big money. But I found that getting my clothes clean and getting my food and things like that, that my expenses and my income was equal. I didn't have anything left over. And after about 3 months, I said, Lord, it looks to me like I'm stuck here forever. Ever. I was angry, you see. You see what the Lord say? God never responds to stupidity. That's the reason he don't talk to most people. One day something happened. Now, I know how to travel. You see, I knew that almost all the pastors in England at that time worked besides being a pastor. So I knew they had dinner at night about 5:30. So I would get on a bus or a train, I'd have the address, and I'd drive into town around 4 o'clock, and I'd find the bus or the streetcar to take me over to their place, and I'd come walking in about 5 o'clock. And the husband wouldn't quite be there yet, and the dear English lady would bring me in and give me a hot cup of tea and set me by the fire and warm me because it was so cold, and would be so nice to me. And so on this day, I was sitting there by the fire. I was nice and warm, and she'd given me a hot cup of tea, and she says, there's a package for you. No, I said, it's not for me. Nobody knows where I am. She said, there's a package for you. I said, well, okay, give it to me. Where'd it come from? The package had been in the rain with the postman, and you couldn't even read where it was from. I opened it up and found a new pair of shoes. Now, I don't know what size I wear. My family can tell you still I'm not sure what size I wear. I wear almost any size, you know. If it feels good, that's the size I wear. I'm not like a woman trying to get, you know, a 10.5 foot into a 9.5 shoe, you know, and struggling with it and calling the company bad names over it. I just say, give me something that feels good. How many of you men like a shoe that feels good? Yeah, and the number don't mean a thing to me. I said, measure it. It might have grown since last time. Give me one that feels good, you know. I slipped on the left shoe, and it fit. It was British. It was a British shoe. They make the finest shoes in the world. I had been wearing Chinese shoes for 6 months. Never did fit. They don't have feet like ours. Not the same shape. And I'd been using newspaper in the bottom of that shoe for quite a while because there was no more leather in the bottom of the thing. And I was using newspaper to take place of leather. And here, my foot went into a shoe. I mean, with a thick sole. A strong shoe. I got so happy I didn't know what to do. I said, let me try the other shoe. And so I went to try the other one. My foot wouldn't go in. I said, oh, dear God, there's always something wrong. I reached down in there, and there was an envelope. And I pulled it out, and then the shoe fit perfectly. You say, who in the world did that? Well, I wouldn't know. I didn't know that. If you'd asked me the size of my shoe, I wouldn't have known. So I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't know the size myself. But evidently God knows even the size of your shoe. We have no idea who sent those shoes. But they fit perfectly, beautifully. I opened the envelope. And you know what the price of a ticket in those days across the Atlantic was if you went tourist class? That's third class. 50 pounds. You multiply that by 5, you got American dollars. The pound was 5 for 1 in those days. 50 pounds was in there. Man, I went and booked my ticket so quick. You can't imagine how quick I booked that ticket. God had given me my transportation back home at one time by someone that I until this day have no idea in the world. I don't believe anybody in Great Britain even knew I wanted to go home. I was preaching every night in a different town or city. And here God made a provision. But then the Lord spoke to me and said, you only know half of this business. Says, I'd like to teach you the other half. And I didn't know there was any other half of the business, you know. As soon as I got home to America, I bought me a new car in South Bend, Indiana. And I went driving it to Minneapolis. And from there, I was going to drive it to Seattle, Washington. I was going to go up into Alaska, and I went up there and raised up 3 beautiful churches that are still the 3 largest churches in Alaska today. Frank Link was one of my best friends at that time. He had the big church in Minneapolis, and also he had the big school, the North Central Bible Institute. And he and I were about to go out to lunch. I'd talked to the students all that morning. We were about to go out to lunch. And I heard him say, send them home. Send them home. I leaned over and I said, would it be polite if I said who? They said 6 students, 6 young men. They're not paying their bills. I can't afford it any longer. Send them home. He was a Swedish man, very strong, speaking and minded. I went into the secretary's office. It was noon and there was nobody in there. And I said, oh God, send them home, send them home. You may be sending them to hell too. They may get so discouraged they won't ever serve God. They sure, Lord, won't be preachers if you send them home from Bible school. And the reason they went home was that they didn't have any money. And I said, Lord, help them. Lord, help them. The Lord said, yes, I do. I want to. I'll let you do it. I said, I don't have any money. Just came back for the mission field. That's what's wrong with most preachers. Just came back from somewhere wrong, you know. He said, oh, yes, you do. You got a brand new car down there. And in your back pocket, you've got the title to it. Sign it. Give your new car away. That thing didn't have 1,000 miles on it. I wanted to rebuke the devil. God said, do it. I signed that and handed it to the president of that college. I said, sell this car. Pay all the way of these 6 young men through school. Don't ever never tell them who did it. Tell them an angel did it. Because I sure God didn't do it myself. The next day I got on a train going to Seattle. That old Great Northern Express. It said, and the devil said, you're a fool, you're a fool, you're a fool. I said, no. And he wasn't satisfied with one start. He had to make another one. The devil said, you're a fool, you're a fool, you're a fool. I said, oh, no, I'm not a fool. I did it for Jesus' sake. Went on to Alaska, stayed up there 6 or 7 months, raised up those churches, came back, and America was at war. There was not a single automobile being made in the whole nation. Every automobile plant was turning out tanks and guns. There were no cars. Even used cars were so expensive, very few people could afford one of the things. You see, this was a desperate moment, like 42 and 43, you know. And it was an awful moment. And so here I was, riding on buses and trains with all my luggage, half angry that I'd given away a brand new car. And I got over here to Detroit. I had a friend over at the American Motors over there. And it was a Hudson company at that moment, the Hudson Car Company. And I called him on the phone. I said, how you doing? He says, fine. He was a Baptist. I said, I'm back in town. I'll be preaching on prophecy. Oh, he says, I'll be there every night. He says, thank you. I appreciate that. I just love prophecy. I just come out of Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia, and so I had a lot to talk about. And he wanted to come. His name was Mr. Gooch. I said, you got any cars? He said, do you have a car? I said, no, I don't have a car. He said, let me talk to the pastor. So Bon Bowman got on the phone. He was a pastor of the tabernacle there. And in 2 minutes, he turned to me and he said, let's go see Gooch. So I said, all right. We got in his car and we drove over. He was on 5 Mile Road and the car company was on 8 Mile Road. So in about 20 minutes, we were over there, went behind those high metal fences. He had the gate open for us, and he was in a glass cubicle out in the middle of the thing. And so we drove over there where he was, and we walked in, and there he was, a great big fat man, about 300 pounds, and he wanted to hug me. And man, I tell you, when that guy hugged you, it was pitiful. You know, he hugged you with his belly. Mostly you couldn't get to the rest of him. And we stood there and talked a little bit, had a good time up in Alaska, raised up the churches, and and good time. And he was so excited about it. And he put up an old dirty rag out on the parking lot where you could put 10,000 cars. He had 200 or 300 scattered out there. He says, go out there and rub this rag and see if you find a color you might like. So I went out there and rubbed one that was black, and I said, no. Another one gray. I said, no, I don't like that one. And then I found one that was Fire Chief red. I said, that's my color. I said, hey, I like that. I don't like bright colors. It's just red and green and yellow. They suit me all right. And so I went back over and threw the rag back down. I said, yeah, there's a red one over there. That'd be all right, 4-door sedan. By that time, he had a big old piece of card And he went out and he says, go bring it over here. Says, it's got a battery in it. Turn it on, bring it over. So I brought it over there. And when I got there, he had a card made out that said, get a Michigan license within 10 days. I said, what do you mean, a Michigan license in 10 days? Well, he says, this license here will only last 10 days. He says, during this time, you got time to go here and secure a license for your car. I said, I don't have any car. He said, let's don't discuss it. He said, I'm putting some papers up in the glove department of your car there, and they'll be all right. And said, if you just get gone, I have some business to talk over with the pastor here. I said, you want me to go to jail, don't you? Because when they find me with a stolen car, and nobody in town has a new car but me, and it's red, they'll think I stole it from the fire department, you know. I said, I'm in trouble. He said, there'll be no trouble. Everything's all right. Tell them to look in the glove box if they say anything. So I went driving out the gates, and a big, you know how big those Hudsons were? And a big, beautiful Hudson, brand new, and it didn't have a mile on it yet. It was sitting in the yard from the factory over a few yards away. You can't imagine how I felt, you know. My buttons just popped open, you see. And the Lord said, don't do that. Well, I said, well, why not? He said, if you had not given your car, a cheap car, to the students, I would not have given you this car. Is that right? Yeah, he says, you have to give in order to receive. He was turning my thinking around, you know. Almost all of us are saying, we've got faith for this. Do you have faith to give anything? You know? And he was testing me. Now, I could take you through about 40 years of that now, and you'd be so excited about it. I give you one instance of it because the people are in this room, you see. A man came by our city from another country, and a missionary man. My church had given him about $100,000 in a year, introducing him to America. And he asked me, he says, I've got a big tent, and it's not finished yet, but I need some trucks to carry it. Says, will you buy one of those trucks? And I said, yeah, I'll buy one. How much is it? He said, $40,000. Says, really, they're $60,000. They're big Mercedes. They're still in the factory, not a mile on them. Would you buy one? But I already said yes. I said yes. And I wrote him out a check for $40,000. That was besides the offering. The devil said, you sure are a fool. You said, what? Oh, we didn't have any money. We were building the church out there where you've been worshiping. We were just halfway through the thing. The church had no money. You said, what in the world did you do? Well, I gave away all the building fund money. And we had to slow the building down because I'd given away the money that was in the building fund. I'm very glad I didn't have any deacons. I'd have lost my job that night. They'd have said, you're crazy. You've given away the building fund money. We will fire you. You see. But there was nobody except just me and God to tussle that one out. Within a few weeks after that, some friends that are here today called and said, we want to see you at your TV station. And I went over there. They said, the Lord brought some money to us, and we were going to give it to all of the different people on your station. The ministers just said, we're going to have such a good time giving all of them a nice piece of money. But the Lord said to give it all to you. And I said, did he? He said, yeah, that's right. But he didn't want to do it, so he asked his wife, who's here today also, you pray about something, didn't tell her what. 2 days later, she came back and says, well, you won't like it. Because I fear that you should give Brother Sumrall all of the money and not divide it up. He said, well, that's what the Lord told me. And they brought it over to the station and gave us a check for $150,000. Yeah. We prayed for them, of course, and said, God bless you. And after they left, I did what all preachers would do. You laymen don't know this. I put that check here, and I said, oh, thank you, Jesus. Oh, rubbing it all over my heart. The Lord said, don't do that. Why? Why, Lord? He says, because if you hadn't have given to the missionary, I wouldn't have given this to you. You'd only got $7,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 is all you'd have got. But said, because you did that, I compel them to give this to you. So the Lord has been teaching me that if you give, it shall be given unto you. If you give above measure, you'll get extra measure at the other end. God wants us to give. Can you say amen? Yeah. And now it goes against nature and it goes against intelligence. You're in an area where you're in an area of trust. And most people can't stand it in there. They get so nervous they collapse. You know, you've got to be strong in there or it don't work. Can you say amen? We're going into Zaire next month to feed thousands of people. We're willing to go. We have to have funds to go. Well, when Nicaragua voted the communists out, the very next day, we sent $50,000 down there. In Romania, we've invested $1,200,000 in food there. If Russia falls on its face, we'll need $10 or $12 million just to feed God's people that are hungry there. You say, how in the world do you think you're going to get it? That you must not know, or you wouldn't be living by faith. You can only live by faith when you don't have what you need. If you have all you need, you don't need any faith. This is the only place you'll ever need faith, earth. In heaven, you don't need to have any faith. You already got it all. And if you have it all, you don't need any faith. You've got God the Father, you got God the Son, you got God the Holy Ghost all sitting there ready to serve you. You don't need any faith. That's for the workshop down here called America. And so God wants you to prove Him and let Him bless you. Can you say amen? We believe that God wants every one of us to be a part of feeding the hungry. You've heard me tell that every pastor should pay tithes. Most pastors don't pay tithes off their church. And that every Christian should fast two meals a week and give the value of that to feed the hungry. We won't ever have to take up offerings. You say, how close are you to it? We're so pitiful. We're so pitiful because people are so selfish that we hardly want to tell you, you know. If we didn't know how to manage things, we wouldn't have anything at all. So few people really help. Pastors will give once, and 3 months later they'll give a little again, and 6 months later they give again. You can't make a planned program like that, you see. We got to have people that you know it's going to be there at a certain time in order for you to make plans for it. Can you say amen? We're making the plans to feed millions of people, and we want partners. Prayer partners and giving partners. So that's what faith is all about.